Welcome, truth seekers and everybody else. This is another episode of the Straight Shooters Show. Thanks a lot for joining us. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Those four things always help the show. My name is Todd Braley, and with me, as always,
is Itai Todd.
And we have a very special guest on the show today, ladies and gentlemen. He is a writer, director, producer, cameraman. Go to his IMDb and it just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls.
That list is long.
Yeah, very long list of accomplishments here in the film world. We're very privileged to have Mr. Mark Savage with us today, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you, Mark, for joining us.
Woo-hoo.
Appreciate it.
It's a privilege to be here, boys.
Well, and we're very excited to get into it and talk to you today about a lot of these projects, man. Again, you've got, I don't know, we might have to do 3 shows just to get the first part. So anyway, I do want to start off, if I may. I had actually seen Purgatory Road back in early 2020, not knowing you, and because you and I both worked with Trista Robinson.
Yes. Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Trista's fantastic. I love Trista.
Yeah, Trista was awesome. She was in our film You Like to Draw, and we flew her out here from California. I think California. And she came out and stayed with us for a few days and was in our film. And yeah, it was awesome. She was awesome to work with. So
she is.
She's in another film of yours coming soon, yeah?
I just worked with her. Yeah, I just worked with her last November on a film that I just did the final sound mix on actually yesterday called Hell's Coming for You. So yeah, Trista it's not as big a role in Hell's as she had in Purgatory Road, because Purgatory Road, well, she's essentially the female lead. But she has, like, let's just say she has a significant role in Hell's Coming for You, and sort of plays like an equally demented character.
Nice.
She was demented, yep, and she did very, very well. I have to say
she really does.
That was a hell of a character.
Yeah.
It's funny that Todd brought that one up. That's actually my favorite film of yours.
Mm-hmm.
I just love how dark it is.
Yep.
It's in my opinion much darker than the others.
Yes, it is, and it is actually my favorite film. Even though I just made one that is actually the next 2, which aren't out yet, but the next 2 are very dark. The one I just made in WA in Washington State called Killcraft. That has a lot of really dark stuff. Bill Oberst was in it, and Bill Oberst, I think, even said to me during it, "You know, Mark, I think this could be actually your darkest film." I said, maybe Bill. I mean, and kind of Bill would know, because Bill himself, he's a guru of the dark arts. So I said, well, yeah, it could be, and Hell's Coming for You is also very dark too, but Killcraft especially is quite dark. But yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that about Purgatory, because it's definitely my most personal film. And I feel it's a kind of closest to my sensibilities in terms of what really kind of fires me up creatively.
Because you co-wrote that one, yes?
Yeah. Co-wrote it with Tom Parnell. Before that, I'd made a film with him called Stress to Kill, which we co-wrote. But I guess I'd say in terms of conception of the movie, Stress was more a concept of Tom's that basically I then came in and co-wrote with him. This one was more a concept of mine that then he came in and co-wrote it. So in a way, I guess you could say that one of us more like initiated and was more a cheerleader for one, which is for Tom, it was Stressed. But on this one, it was more Purgatory for me, because, Tom wasn't necessarily a horror fan. He likes horror, but in a way, it wasn't in his blood the same way that it is for me, even though, like, I guess you could say, probably not so much horror per se that's in my blood, but it's more the whole idea of, basically aberrant, kind of antisocial, inconsistent behavior. That's kind of what I'm most interested in.
Yeah, because Tom also, he wrote Painkiller.
Yes. And Painkiller, again, was initiated more by him because he lost his son to opioids about 9 months earlier, and after he dealt with the worst part of the grief, because obviously you never get over your 21-year-old son dying. But when he was ready, he said to me one day, "What do you think of the idea of making a film that kind of explores the whole opioid epidemic?" And I just said to him, "Are you sure you're ready to, do this?" And he sort of said, "Yeah, I think I might be." So, a little time passed, and yeah, that was how that one came to be, because he wanted to make something that sort of at least addressed something that's not often addressed when speaking about opioids, is that, because it's always attacking the, literally street dealers and things when it comes to drugs. But here, he wanted to do something that really attacked where the problem is, which is with doctors, politicians, and, the medical fraternity, which really, pushes opioids like street dealers pushing heroin, except they kind of do it legitimately.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has this sort of like a Death Wish kind of vibe to it. Which must have been cathartic for him, I guess, writing that script.
It was definitely cathartic for him, and it was an interesting balance with that film, because in some ways it's quite dialogue heavy, because there's a lot of, because we've got Bill's character, who speaks on the radio, and we're able to get out a lot of exposition through Bill's character. And I must admit, that also is inspired by my love of talk radio, just as a medium, but also even Eric Bogosian's play Talk Radio and Oliver Stone's Talk Radio. I love those, both the play and the film. And then going back to Romero's Martin, Martin is speaking on the radio to a DJ on the radio, and is also kind of ruminating on the idea of him being a vampire, and the guy is sort of almost kind of like half mocking him, but kind of doing it respectably. Yeah. So I admit that a lot of that sort of interest comes from my own love of talk radio. I've always loved talk radio in Melbourne, and Itai would know this. I've been a listener to 3OW since I was about 8 years old, which is a talk station, because my parents always, my dad always had it on the radio since I was a kid, going right back to Darren Hench, and
very political, yeah.
So I always loved the idea of talk radio, and I think it's more relevant than ever now, because it's so immediate. But yeah, in that film, the interesting balancing act with Painkiller was making it an exploitation film, so that you'd be giving that market what it wants. Because I'm very aware of what the markets want. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and if you made a film that was just kind of like pure preachiness and just pure polemics about the opioid epidemic, that's fine for a particular niche market, but not the market really that we're making it for, and also the market that really I love making films for, which is the sort of exploitation action film market. So the balance was going, okay, we want to basically have that balance between getting out the exposition, getting out the message, but at the same time, giving audiences the action. There's quite a lot of killing in the movie, which is kind of very much kind of motivated by what our main character on the radio is doing. But yeah, that was always a balancing act. And at times I felt, and I think even Tom felt, maybe it's a little too talky, and I still think at times maybe talk could have been cut out a little bit. But then again, because we're so personal, I understood also Tom's reason for, wanting to really kind of emphasize that, that aspect of it. So it's always an interesting dilemma when you do a partnership with somebody, and we're very good partners in terms of creatively, because that if one of us does initiate something, the other one will always support it, and then generally, get on board. And at the same time, we are, we're not too precious about, this is my part and I think this should be in. We're very good at saying that's just not working. That's working, whatever. And, at the same time, usually by the edit time, I'll usually go away and be more involved in the edit. Tom's generally not that involved in the edit, but then I come back and show him the cuts and that kind of thing. So, I think partnerships are really interesting, writing partnerships, because I've had it with Tom and also with another guy, David Richardson, who's an Australian-based writer, written scripts together. And it's really interesting because on top of being able to listen to each other's ideas and able to kind of kill each other's ideas, if not your own ideas, to be able to move forward, you also need to allow each other to prioritize some of the obsessions that you have. So you're always going to find when you're in a partnership writing that there's going to be certain obsessions that are going to manifest themselves. And, you know, generally I'm good with that because generally you become friends with people who you already philosophically align with anyway, you know, so it wasn't with both David and with Tom. Yeah. Like, you know, there was never any great tension between, you know, we're now worlds apart. I've never had a writing partnership where I was worlds apart with anyone, which is, you know, that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can sort of relate to a lot of that.
Yes.
Sort of my filmmaking side. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what have you felt too? Like when you do partnerships, like, like what have your experiences been, Itai?
Well, I used to sort of co-write, co-produce, co-direct with a partner, with a staff angel who's now back in Israel. We do a show together now and everything, but we don't work in that way anymore. But it was definitely an interesting experience because you really have to, you know, leave your ego at the door kind of thing. That it's all about the project, and that's how it's always been with us. You know, yes. We just did whatever needed to be done. Mm-hmm. We were, you know, directors and writers, but we were also on set as both, you know, like line producers and anything else that mm-hmm. the crew needed. You know, at that sort of end of indie filmmaking, you have to do what you got to do. So we did all that, and there was never any real issues. So collaboratively, I actually don't mind that kind of place, you know, of sharing duties with someone else. And usually people have a problem because they want, you know, their name all over the film. And for me, it's not.
Is like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that and I got to do this and I got to do that, which is why I have yet to ever find anybody that I can collab with because the egos are so far out of reach, with the exception of Itai, you know, and he and I, we spend more time on our podcast than we do trying to collab on movie stuff. But I can never find anybody. You guys are lucky that you can have those collaborations. I've had 2 collaborations and they both were probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had.
Right. You know, that's interesting what you say though, because it sounds like at the same time you were able to read some of the red flags. Because to me, because I've been doing this for a long time, I'm able to basically pick up red flags in so many areas right away when I meet people. You know, like either someone's it's an ego problem, they're completely delusional, they're completely unrealistic, they're basically bullshitting about what they've done. You know what I mean? Like it's a whole plethora of stuff. You know.
Yeah, mine were after the fact, or after.
Right.
You know, it was
lessons learned. Yeah.
There were no red flags. It was everything was good. Everything was good. Everything was good. Everything was shit. And that's just what happened, you know, and then somebody thinking that because they contributed to a project that ends up didn't happen for multiple reasons, thought he could just take that script and go someplace else and have somebody else make it without talking to me. And it was my idea. And it was that. And I was kind of like, no, you can't do that. You know, I did the copyright on it. I did all, you know, I did, you know, 80% of it. And not that his contribution was bad or wasn't there, but it was like, I basically did 80% of the work and then said, I need some more details. I'm not good at description when it comes to like the actions. It's a shark film. And I wanted more detail in the actions of the shark attacks, and he writes books, so he was good at that. And then he just decided when we found out that we probably weren't going to be able to get the movie done, he thought he could just scoop it up and go with a bunch of other guys what annoyed me was the fact that nobody bothers when they're new to the industry. They don't bother to do the homework to find out how things work.
how things work. Yeah.
And Itai says it all the time. You know, there are guys that are filmmakers, us, and then there are people who make films, other people.
Yes.
And so, you know, it's like nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to be famous, but nobody wants to do the work to get there.
Oh yeah, no, I find that all the time. It sounds in your situation it was a combination of complete misunderstanding of chain of title and disrespect.
Yeah, because it's basically stealing.
Yeah,
but on a positive side, and I think Todd is forgetting this. He's recently been collaborating with a certain Jaden Braley, and that collaboration has been going great.
I was getting to that part.
Well, that's good to hear.
Well,
a father-son collaboration.
Yeah. My oldest kid, my oldest son, is following in my footsteps, and that, like I said, when I was in California helping him shoot this music video, but we've also he was my cinematographer on the feature that we shot back in February, and is currently going to be co-directing with me on a kind of a horror thriller that we're working on right now. So
Possession story.
Well, that sounds like a good partnership, keeping it close to the family there.
And it's actually good because we work really well together. There's never, I mean, when we shot the Chip back in February, it was, there was a lot of planning, to get to where we were going with it. And then, when it came time, it's like, you know what, that shot that we were talking about, it's not going to work. We're not going to be able to do it. And he turns to me and says, what do you want to do? I said, all right, well, what if we did this? And he says, yeah, okay, so we do this, and then I can do this, and then I could do this. And I'm like, yeah, that'll work great. So the with that collaboration process, it's I'm thinking and okay, we're going to do this and this, and then he's jumping in going, yeah, let's go ahead. And I love people. I love collaborating with people that not only work well with you, but then can build on what you're already doing. Take something that's good and make it better.
Yeah. That's in a way like, that's the ideal kind of partnership, because I mean, I took a long time to actually find anybody who could also help produce films with me, because I always had people interested in the idea of producing, but then when they find out that producing itself is really kind of hell on earth, and they're sort of like, they back away, because they'll sort of say, oh, I'd love to help you produce films, and I'm like, okay, what do you do? Do you raise money? Do you have good distribution relationships? Can you line produce? Do you have good distribution relationships? No, I've got none of those, but I'd love to learn. I go, no, I'm not hiring an apprentice.
Yeah.
as a partner in producing, And so, I mean, I just made a film with Killcraft was, I brought in my friend Jeff Miller to produce it with me, and Jeff did a great job. We also then, prior to that, did, what was it? Yeah, Bringing Back Dead in New York last year. And it was a great collaboration, because usually on that one, I was just director and exec producer, but Jeff was producer. But then on this one, I was main producer, then brought in Jeff to produce with someone else. And on that one, it was just really one of those things where, it's good when number one, you don't have to look over their shoulder to make sure stuff's getting done. Right. They're doing stuff that makes your life easier, and it's not redundant. It's not like you're both doing the same things, and we both kind of have different focuses. But that takes a long time to be able to, find someone who can do that. I mean, it's literally taken me like 5 decades, to find someone who can actually do that. And it's great. It's great when you do. But on most of my movies up until then, I was the main producer on those, simply because I never met anyone who I could trust.
Necessity.
And necessity. And the same with raising money. I kind of realized very early on that the only way to really make a lot of films is you've got to raise money yourself. Right. And if you rely on people, because I see, a lot of directors, you constantly complain about, I sent my script to this producer, and, he said he's got another 20 projects ahead of mine at the moment. And that's just a bullshit game. You'll never end up making anything like that. You're better doing your own stuff, raising money yourself. And sure, you can still send other stuff to producers, but don't rely on those people solely for your career, because you'll end up making one film every 20 years. And also, most established producers already have established networks of people they get scripts from. So it's not like, because it's not like, you know, it takes 5 minutes to produce a movie. Every movie you produce is a major commitment. So when someone comes along and says, "Are you interested in basically looking at my script?" Well, half the time, like even with myself, I've got pretty much 4 movies at the moment lined up over the next 12 months. So if someone came along and said, "Oh, can you do something like in the next 6 months?" I would say no, but I can in 12 months because I'm then ready. You know, so the whole point is, you know, it's so finding them people who can just interrupt their flow of stuff they're producing and go, "I'll produce your script." I mean, the likelihood of that is very slim. And also add to that, do they even like your script? Do they even like, you know, the elements in it? Do they want you even to direct it? I mean, you may not have enough credits that they feel confident enough with you directing it. I mean, there's so many variables that, you know, from the very beginning, I pretty much produced films. From my very first film, Marauders, I produced it with people I was working with at a company called South Pacific Video, Paul Harrington, Colin Savage, my brother, and another guy, Richard Wollstonecroft, who then went on later on and made movies. We produced it because I just said to the main guy who ran the place, I said, "You know something, your equipment's just sitting around doing nothing on the weekends. It's such a shame. That's 2 out of 7. That's 2 out of 7 days. Your equipment's doing nothing. What a wasted investment." And he said, he just looked at me, he sort of said, and I said, "Well, why don't I make use of your equipment on weekends?" So pretty much what that led to is a 40-week weekend shoot on the first film. But again, because it was thinking, I'm going to make it happen rather than, you know, pitching to people. And, you know, half the time, it's funny because I know I'm leaping from subject to subject here, but I say to people, you know, stop working so hard on getting a perfect pitch document. Work hard on your relationships with people. Because, you know, because the whole point is, you can have the best pitch document in the world. If they don't like you, if they don't like, you know, if they simply don't like you as a person, it doesn't matter how good your pitch document is. It doesn't even matter whether they like your script. You know, especially when you're directing it. It's different if you're just selling it, because that's a different thing. But if you're approaching them as a director and a writer, they better like you. And so, you know, I think people don't put enough emphasis on building relationships, because it's relationships that gets films made, essentially.
You're more likely to get someone's involvement if they like you than if they actually like the script. Yes. Sometimes they're not going to be in love with the idea, but they think, you know what, I believe in this person, and maybe they see something I don't. I mean, you know, that kind of thing. But if they don't like you, it doesn't really matter how much they like the script.
No, because I hear this all the time. Someone goes, "Oh, well, I'm working on this pitch." Even just last week, someone said, "Oh, could you give me some advice on this? I've got all these pitch documents. I'm going to AFM. I'm going to take them to AFM." So my first question was, "Who do you know who you're meeting at AFM?" And they're like, "I don't know that many people, but I'm going to go." And I said, "Look, this is a reality of AFM. Number one, if you only need to meet these people at AFM, then you don't really know them. And most really good distributors and buyers, you don't need to meet them at AFM for them to get involved in your project, because you're emailing them all year long." This idea that, "Oh, I've got to meet them at AFM," that simply shows, well, clearly you don't really have any relationship with them at all. So you're hoping to be able to knock on their door on the office, and half the time they're going to be busy because people have already booked them up. So, you know, it's all to me, you know, a lot of it's kind of like a lot of it's a bullshit game. And again, it's undermining the value of simply long-term relationships, you know, because even like at the moment, like, you know, I'm doing a film my next film is, and we can begin shooting in November, but that's a guy I've been talking to, you know, the investor and everyone who's around him. That's a 3.5-year relationship I've been working on. You know what I mean? I've been friends with him. I've done little jobs for him and that kind of thing. You know, it's just building relationships. You know what I mean? It's and I'm doing that all the time. Like, I find that that's what I'm doing as much as writing and as much as the filmmaking. I'm constantly building relationships and also servicing the relationships. You know, keeping in touch with the people you've made films with. You know, keeping in touch with the people you're about to make films with. You know, if you look, the more transparent, the more you include people in the process, the more you get done.
And you're more likely to get something out of a Zoom conversation than an AFM meeting. So
yes,
you know,
yes, and you don't pay for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't need to travel either.
Yeah, you don't need to travel. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very I think in a way, the AFM model is, it's mostly aimed at people who just haven't had that much experience in the business. Because when you've got experience, well, you've already got a line of credits, and I was at that stage. I mean, there was a stage when all I had was Super 8 movies. No one's really interested in that. I had like 100 Super 8 shorts, 3 features on Super 8, but no one gives a shit about that. But then when I did one feature, and that really made in Australia anyway, made a very small blip, and then it takes a long time to kind of like build. It's more what you're doing. You're building legitimacy, and you're building credibility with people, and you just got to be prepared to make it like a lifetime commitment. That's how I see it. It's a lifetime commitment. It's not even when people come here in LA, people often say to me, because I said to someone, how long do you think you'd need to be in LA if you moved here, to get firmly established? And I remember someone said to me once, oh, well, at least 10 years. And I remember at first I went, 10 years? What are you talking about? And no, all right. Because unless you come to LA riding on the coattails of a huge hit, right? Like in an exceptional situation, say like a James Wan, right, with Saw. That's an exception. He's the exception. He's not the norm. If you come here and you're not coming in on a wave of a massive international success, you're building relationships all the time. I mean, that's kind of what you're doing, and it just takes a bit at a time. Building up connections. I mean, I had very few connections when I first came back here again in 2006. I'd made some films in Australia, but it just takes time, and you just got to be patient. And I also, with me, I don't really see anyone at all as being my competition. I just see myself as being my own competition. I just got to try to make better films, but no one's my competition because I'm not in any way competing with anybody. I'm literally not running a race against someone for one person's money, or I'm not going in for Project Greenlight, because then I may have some competition. That's all concrete. But as an indie filmmaker, I don't think it really helps you to see other indie filmmakers as competition. I see other indie filmmakers they're either friends, collaborators, or I just don't know them at all. And I'm just not part of their world. But they're in no way competition, and they're certainly not enemies either. Like I just don't see things along those lines,
Absolutely.
And you're one of the few that think that way, because I don't know. I lived in California until about 1999. I lived there for about 30 years, and I remember when I started to seriously look into making movies back in the early 90s, the only competition we had was, according to my directing teacher, James Pasternak, was Hollywood, and indie filmmakers. Everybody was tight, man. I mean, everybody wanted everybody to succeed, whatever we had to do to help the other guy get a movie done, get their stuff done, and now, and I blame, I mean, this is just me, I blame film festivals for that. Now it's like, who can I choke out? Who can I talk enough smack about and I'm just like, guys, what happened to this?
Right.
Yeah. It's sad to have to witness that. I mean, I'm 57 years old. I ain't got time for that shit.
I agree that I mean film festivals are a very strange beast too, because they're they're also very political.
Yeah.
So and they don't really represent. I don't think really they represent themselves really fairly and squarely a lot of the time. I mean, there are some exceptions, but I think they're a very odd beast. I would say the only time I've ever had, and it's not really a case of competitiveness, but the only time I've like put my foot down on something, you know, for example, working with someone, because it was only when someone said to me, "Oh no, we should get together and co-direct." See, I don't believe myself in co-directing. It was different if I'd grown up with someone who I knew had exactly the same sensibility as me. Like, for example, if my brother, who I did make films with, my brother one day said to me, you know, well, why don't we co-direct, you know, because we used to make films together as kids. If why don't we co-direct this, I'd probably feel good with him, you know, because, you know, we're very close and all that. But this was someone who, you know, I'm not going to name them, but this is someone whose work I didn't respect in the sense of their craft, you know, but at the same time, you know, they made their own types of movies and that was fine. But I didn't feel like I didn't feel we'd be a good fit because I felt that we had very different ideas of aesthetics in terms of quality, you know, in the same way that, you know, he'd do something and I'd sort of go, well, to me, that looks very sloppy. You know what I mean? So he'd be like, well, you know, that takes too much time to do that. And I'd say, well, that's why we shouldn't work together because, you know, your priorities on quality are different to mine. And I'm not saying that I have the world's highest, you know, priorities on quality, but, you know, I'm pretty fussy about lighting and camera work. I mean, I also shoot and often operate, and I'm very, very, you know, wouldn't say dictatorial, but very, very, you know, I definitely know what I want in terms of shots. I'm not the kind of person who says to the DP, well, you just set it up where you want. I'll literally go, okay, camera over there. And you know, and often I'm not going to necessarily dictate the lens, but often I will, you know, simply because, but it's only because we're already now collaboratively together. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to find someone who's aesthetically aligned with you as well. Even as a cinematographer or even as production designer and that, you know, like it's all again part of the collaborative aspect of filmmaking. You know, there's about 3 or 4 DPs I always work with, and you know, because they're people I feel very aligned with. You know, feel very aligned with those people. But again, it takes a long time to get to that place. But yeah, like I never see other people as being I'm competing with them. You know, to me it's just pointless doing that. Well, it's like the same pointlessness is sort of going, well, this director, you know, did a huge Hollywood movie when they were 30 and I'm 50 and I haven't. Who gives a shit? Yeah. I mean, I just don't give a shit. You know, and also I like the fact that the films I make, I get to make the film I want. I don't have anybody looking over my shoulder and saying, no, we're recutting that. We're giving that to an actor to cut. You know, there's none of that kind of bullshit going on. Yeah. And I get to make the films I want, you know, collaboratively and working with the producers. But, you know, I never feel like, you know, when you hear people saying, well, the project got taken away from me, which is more at the big budget level, you know, where you've literally got sometimes dozens of producers and executive producers, you know, so I don't feel like I'd say the only thing I'm missing, you know, at this stage, you know, is of course, you know, massive directing fees. But the whole point is I'm fine. You know, I made a living for the last 30 years just making movies, you know, and just doing this. So the thing is, I'm quite happy. And as Oliver Stone says, how many yachts can you ski behind, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think people who are competitive are very short-sighted. Yes. Because they just want people to think, oh, I'm better than this person. Yes. And it's like, in the end, who cares? What is your goal in the beginning? If your goal is to be just better than certain people, then you're doing the wrong thing from the beginning. Your goal should be to get to a certain point to create what you want to create and have a kind of, you know, maybe fit it into a lifestyle that you want to have, but that's it. You know, you should always strive for that personal goal rather than, you know, to beat out other people. Who cares in the end?
Yeah, you make a great point because, you know, a real filmmaker makes films because they want to put this world in their head on the screen. Yeah. So that's another reason. Why would you compete with someone else? Because the other person wants to put their world on the screen. So that's why there's also, if you're a true filmmaker, there is no competition. That's like David Lynch. They'd be like David Lynch saying, oh, I'm competing against, well, who? There's no one's making David Lynch films. No one's making Herzog films. No one's making like one of my favorite directors, Kinji Fukasaku films or Kaneto Shindo films. Another person who's like a mentor to me, who was, you know, the late Kaneto Shindo, because they were making films that had their own personal touch to the movies, like Scorsese. Again, Scorsese's not competing with anybody.
No.
You know,
Is Scorsese sitting at home today saying, "Well, at least I'm better than Coppola"? No, he's not, because to some people he is, to some people he's not.
Yes.
On some lists he's above him, on some lists he's below him. It's also subjective.
Yes.
So in the end, who cares? I think that the
Yes.
true great directors don't give a crap about this stuff.
No,
So,
I agree.
Yeah.
It's very small-minded.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what's funny is when I on my trip to California, I bought an audiobook, which I've never done before because I was always afraid that if I was listening to an audiobook in the car and driving a long way, it was going to put me to sleep. But I got
the same.
I got the book Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli. It's about, you know, the making of The Godfather. And Spielberg said after he saw The Godfather, he goes, "What do I need to do this for anymore? You know, the best movie's already been made." He said, "I can't top that. Nobody can top that." And so it's, you know, that your guys talking about that the whole competition thing. I was thinking, God, even Spielberg was trying to be competitive back then. It's
because because a truly individualistic filmmaker, I mean, Spielberg certainly has an individual style, but he doesn't necessarily have individualistic subject matter because he doesn't write many of his films, you know. But someone like a Cronenberg, or, you know, a Wes Craven, a John Woo, you know, Ringo Lam, you know, people like that, you know, they're more individualistic filmmakers that, I can't imagine they would ever watch The Godfather and say, well, what else is there to do? Because they would simply say, well, you know, that was Coppola's film and it was a beautifully made film. To more than anything, to me, that would simply just inspire me to work harder than ever on my vision, you know, and, you know, as humble as my vision is, as, you know, modest as it is, but at the same time, at least each filmmaker can at least sort of go, well, this is what I've got to contribute. This is what I want to do, because essentially I think you're kind of making, as a filmmaker, the film you'd want to see. You know, and also trying to at least, you know, put a certain world in your head onto the screen, from the page to the screen. And just the process of doing that, to me, is the juice. You know, the process is amazing. And it's a very difficult process because literally, because it's almost like it's on very rickety tracks going over a bridge all the way, and you've got to keep it on that bridge. And that's part of what directing is directing everybody to help you keep it on that bridge, to kind of like, for it to be true to the track so it doesn't go off the rail. You know, that's kind of what I'm doing. I think a lot of directing is keeping things on a rickety bridge, because it's very easy to see how it can go off if you don't put your foot down now and then. I mean, I see this all the time. And even in my own films, I see it, you know, because you'll also find sometimes it's a very lonely thing too, because sometimes you'll find yourself often very much alone in some of the things you're trying to do. I mean, you might have one person who understands, might be the cinematographer or the producer, but even the crew don't always get what you're doing. And you sometimes will perceive, you know, murmurings of doubt, you know, murmurings of, is this guy fucking crazy? Or, you know, that type of thing. And it's really important to be really true to what you believe in, and not allow yourself to sort of be detoured and swayed by sort of the echoes and the voices and the little murmurings around you, because it can be really, really distracting at times.
Which is why it's so important to have a cast and crew who trust you, whether or not they see what you're trying to do. You know, sometimes they go, okay, I've seen his work, I love it, I know he knows what he's talking about, I'm just going to go with the flow and just take instruction and go. And you mentioned dictatorship before, and, you know, people ask me about that. You know, who's the most important person in a film? Is it the producer? Is it the writer? And I say, no, it's the director. There's no other person. The director on set, and within any kind of film, director is God. I say to people, take it that way. It doesn't mean that you have to act like you are God, but that's how other people should see it, because everything falls on the director. If the film is a failure, nobody blames the writer or the producer or even the actors. They blame the director. And it is all on us, and it is really our project and our vision, and that's how it should be. It's a tough job, but, you know, we do it because, as we said before, we want to get out what we have in here onto the screen, and that's the end goal. And competition and, you know, and people murmuring and all of that, you have to block it all out and just do what you have to do to get to your end goal, which is, again, making as many films as we can.
Yeah, because in a sense, especially when you work with, say, for example, especially elements of a new crew, people who are not necessarily worked with you before, and that's something I encounter a lot because I make films all over the country. So I don't just make, I actually make very few films in LA. I make, like, the last one was, Washington. The one before that was Nevada and California. Then the one before that was Tampa. The one before that was Mississippi. So you always, you may have a few core people, but you're always meeting new people. And the thing is, no one can be expected to understand you when they've just come onto the shoot. So the thing is, the important thing that director, you've also got to show very early on that you know what you're doing, but that you also stick to your guns and you're consistent. Because I think no one dislikes anything more than someone who's inconsistent, except an inconsistent person wouldn't care. But the thing is, anyone who's consistent appreciates other people who are consistent. So I feel that as a director, as much as it seems like the dictatorial part is simply like, this is the way I'd like to have it done, but also the pressure on you is to make sure that you're able to answer all the questions, that you're able to also, just simple things like, being told, okay, because you took longer at that location, the fight scene we're doing now, which we originally had 5 hours to do, we've now got 2.5 hours. Just things like that. Like that's a thing that as a director, it's a terrifying thing, but it's something that you've got to work out a way to do that thing effectively now in 2.5 hours. You're cutting shots, you're combining sequences, you're even cutting out, maybe you may have, 6 particular, blocks of action in your action scene. You may have to take out, block number 3 and 5, in order to get to the end, because you need the first one, you need the end one, but you've got to start taking them out. And that again is the sort of thing that I dealt with that on Bringing Back Dead, and I also dealt with it to some extent on Hell's Coming for You, which had a huge amount of action sequences and not a lot of time. And same with Bringing Back Dead. We didn't have a huge shoot, but we had pretty complex action sequences. And also I tend to shoot stuff that's complicated as well, in the sense that I like using dollies a lot. So that things take longer when you got dollies. I like cranes and dollies and jibs and stuff. Because I think I understand the kind of like the benefit of having interesting kind of spatial shifts within scenes and that type of stuff, which I think I learned more from Hong Kong and Japanese films than maybe American films, except maybe with the exception of maybe like De Palma films and Scorsese films. But, that kind of stuff means it takes longer, because you'll sometimes have people saying, look, why don't you just do that on the sticks? And yes, sometimes you will do it on the sticks, and you have to, which is fine. But then you've got to prioritize, okay, well, what stuff do I not want to do on the sticks? So, again, it's a constant process of assessing, making judgments, and then acting on the new judgments. And it's just happening all the time. And at the same time, the film's got to look like it was made smoothly, and it all happened kind of like, it all happened in continuity, and it's an interesting process.
Yeah, and then that's why I always say when people ask, what's the main director's job on set, and I say, look, there's everything to do with the actors and everything else, but essentially we're problem solvers.
Yes,
we have to solve problems on the fly, and that's more indie, but we do that on a regular basis.
Yes, I couldn't agree. That's what you're doing. You're all the time solving problems, because also by the time you get to the shooting of the film, you already know how you want to do it. And I'll storyboard some stuff, and other stuff I don't. Like if I've got dialogue heavy scenes, I generally don't storyboard. I'll construct, on this last one, we built sets and that kind of stuff. So I'll construct the set, and I'll kind of know generally how I know the feel I want, but I'll do the shots, but I will block it. I'll block it with actors before they go into makeup and wardrobe. And then as soon as they've blocked it, then, because especially if it's a new set you haven't worked with, that's why it's very difficult then to try to adhere to storyboards and get stuck doing storyboards that don't really work in this particular location. So I find that storyboards are great when you need to share a concept where there's going to be effects and stunt components. But I'm not someone who wants to storyboard every single thing, because I actually found it, because I have done that before, but I actually find it's somewhat counterproductive.
As Todd always says, you're not, Todd, you always say, I'm not married to the script.
Right.
And I say, I'm not married to my storyboards. It's like they change.
Well, the storyboards, though, I mean, those things are so, I mean, you can go as elaborate and make them look, amazing and almost comic book like, but then at the same time, or you can do it with stick figures.
Yeah.
But then the amount of time that it takes to get storyboards done, I remember somebody on a project that I did a few years ago, he's like, "Oh, so where are your storyboards?" I said, "Dude, I don't do storyboards. I'm kind of like you, Mark, that I'll storyboard what I feel I need to be able to share."
Yes.
But rarely do I want to spend that kind of time. I get people, "Hey man, let me do your storyboards." "Oh, let me do your storyboards." It's like, "Oh no, because I changed my mind when I get on set."
Well, that's right. And also, if someone's saying they want to do your storyboards, that means they're going to come and sit with you sometimes for days on end, and you often don't have the time to do that. And you also it's hard to manage your pre-production time to have somebody doing that.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's more a case of, I'd rather do things like even what I did with the cinematographer, Ryan, on the one I just did. I gave him frames from a few different films I like in terms of like the look we're going for. I'd say, okay, see the way we're doing the backgrounds on that there. I like the backgrounds. The backgrounds are sort of falling off into this particular color, whereas it's more desaturated on the faces in the foreground. And then I give him, and we shot this anamorphic. So the thing is, I like basically shooting this one anamorphic. Yeah, so that was kind of how we arrived at the general look. Yeah, and I pretty much just said to him, I've got like a shot list of some stuff, but again, it's really just stuff that I absolutely need as essentials. But to a large extent, I think, again, people who are obsessed with storyboards, and again, as I say, with a preface of, it's different if you're working with like many different departments, like
right.
Especially people who are obsessed with storyboards. Again, it's a similar bullshit of being obsessed with pitch decks. It's the same thing. That if you're working with a producer that you're working with a production designer and cinematographer and people who you work with all the time, they know what you want. They know the kind of style that you're doing, and all you're doing is you're making shifts in things, and obviously the style is going to somewhat service the script anyway. So the thing is, but at the same time, and again, you could bring it back to David Lynch. You could still say Lynch has a fairly Lynchian shooting style. He doesn't shoot his films, for example, like Tony Scott. Tony Scott's very different style to say like David Lynch, and David Fincher is a very different shooting style to say, someone like Brad Anderson, whatever. It's the individualistic aspect is already imprinted on the preparation of how the film's going to get made.
Absolutely. And the thing, like, we're talking about storyboards in Hollywood, they probably stick to their storyboards a lot more because they have such a massive budget.
Yes.
And if something goes wrong and if there's a delay, I'll put some money on that. We'll fix it. We can't do that in Indie.
Yeah.
When I was making Third Temple, I made like a half-hour short.
Right.
I'll never do that again. I'll push it to a feature or shorter. But I made a half-hour short where we were delayed about something like 6.5 hours on the first day of a 2-day shoot.
Wow.
and I had to make decisions, and I grabbed the the storyboards, and we had all kinds of camera movement on there, and I was like, okay, this is out, this is out, this is out, because stylistically I was saying we're going to make a different film, but at least we'll have a film.
Yes.
Because we need to get the story shot. If we don't get the story, we have nothing. So I'll have this magnificent camera movement and beautiful shot, but if I'm not going to get the story, I'm going to need more shooting days, which I don't have.
Yes.
So my cinematographer was upset with me, but I was like, at least I'll have a film. So, sometimes that happens. And he did in that case. And at the end of it, I remember this is one that I co-directed, co-produced, co-wrote with Asaf, and he looked at me at the end of the shoot and he said, I don't know if we have a film. And I said, oh, we have a film. Because the vision was mine. Like, I came up with the idea. I could see it in my head from everything that I made sure that we shot. I knew that we could get in the editing suite and knock it out, and we did. And it doesn't look like the original way we wanted it to look, but it's at least 75-80% of what we wanted.
Yes.
And that's how Indie greatly differs from Hollywood. That's really what it is.
And that's a good percentage. 75, 80% of what
it was better than I thought we'd get. Yeah. I mean, that's really almost like our 100% is 80. Yes. If we get to 80, we've done really well.
You're right.
So, yeah. I totally get that. I mean, I had, when we did the chip back in February, you know, I had gone through that thing, gone through the script, made all my, you know, because I write my shot list on the outsides of the script. So, and I put brackets on things where I want the wide shot to be here, and I'm almost kind of editing it at the same time. So when I handed this, you know, I had let me back up. I had told my son, I said, okay, here's what I want to do. I said, I want this, because it's a poker. It's basically surrounded around some teens that buy into a poker game that has severe consequences if you lose. And you know, it's one location. And I said, I just want the camera to keep moving. And there were times where we had 6-7 cameras set up at the same time, and I wanted them all moving. So, you know, there were times we had 3 or 4 dollies set up, you know, and moving and all that. And then when I said, okay, and then I asked my kid, I said, do you want to direct or do you want to edit your first movie? and he's like, I don't know if I could do that. I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you do this? You edit the movie, because he edits music videos really, really well. And if you saw the latest one that we just shot, he's already got it cut together. And it's already been approved. I mean, we shot it on Saturday. Day before yesterday, he sent me. Yeah, and they already sent it to the record label and everything. The record label guys were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And so, so I just said, "You edit the movie. Don't worry about the audio," because the audio thing was a real rough situation of him trying to figure out how to get everything set up. And I said, "Look, I'll do the audio. You just let me know what takes you use." Right. And which camera it is and stuff like that. And so with that, you know, and with the collaboration aspect of it, you know, it's and without storyboards at all, I think we drew 2 storyboards just because I was and it was on set. Right. I'm like, okay, I'm not understanding the shot. Okay, so this is what I want. Okay, stick men, stick figures, the whole, you know. So yeah, it's definitely, you know, the whole storyboard thing. I don't know. I tried doing that on something I did a long time ago, and I was like, God, this is a lot of fucking work. and then completely changed when you walk on set. You got on set and it's like, well, wait a minute. You start looking around, you go, huh? And like you said, Mark, working on a stage or working on a constructed set that you hadn't worked on before, and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely understand that. All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That was part 1 of this episode.
Part 2 will be coming up very, very soon, so look it up on the
Straight Shooters YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.
See you soon.